President Trump is working to finalize key trade agreements as global leaders scramble to adapt to sweeping new U.S. tariffs. So, just how critical is a swift resolution for the U.S. economy? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
President Donald Trump is stepping directly into high-stakes trade talks with other nations. Flanked by top officials, President Trump met with a Japanese delegation in Washington, D.C., and later declared big progress had been made. Japan's prime minister praised the discussions as candid and constructive, but acknowledged the path ahead won't be easy. President Trump is also meeting with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in the first face-to-face with a European leader since the 20% tariffs on European exports were suspended. Here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
We have stopped making things, especially a lot of things that are relevant for national security. I think one of the few good outcomes from COVID was we had a beta test for what maybe a kinetic war with a large adversary could look like. And it turned out that these highly efficient supply chains were not strategically secure. So that we don't make our own medicines, that we don't make our own semiconductors, that we don't make our own ships anymore. So I think if I were to say, like, was there any good outcome from COVID? It woke the world up to these supply chain problems. So economic security is national security.
For more, I'm joined by Silicon Valley entrepreneur and U.S.-Vietnam relations advocate Allison Nguyen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, of course, we know that this is an economic front. Of course, we just heard from the secretary talking about more of a national security, issue in trying to broker some of these deals. But now the president is involved. So what do you think his personal involvement is in these trade talks? What do they signal about the urgency of reaching a deal with Japan?
It's very urgent. It's the #1 priority for the president and also for the American people. People are very concerned about it. The stock market is, Wall Street's concerned, Main Street is concerned about it, and the president wants to be involved. He wrote The Art of the Deal. He is probably one of the best deal makers in the world. He knows how to do this, and he is the captain steering this ship, and we're going to land at a very good place, I believe.
How are U.S.-Japan trade relations being reshaped by these negotiations?
That's a great question. And so traditionally, we've thought of Japan as a very friendly country. But there are huge trade imbalances, as there are with many of our Asian friends and allies, including Vietnam, where my parents are from. Many of the ASEAN countries, Thailand, the Philippines, they all have trade surpluses on the U.S., where the U.S. may have like 0 or 2% tariffs. Many of them have high tariffs, and I didn't even know myself that Vietnam had a 90% tariff on U.S. goods. It's really incredible, and I don't think a lot of Americans knew that. And so it's not even reciprocal. We're only doing half. I know that the U.S. put 46%, which is half of the tariffs, and many of these things, we're only putting half or a third of the tariff of what they put on us. And so it's not really a trade war, but more of leverage and negotiation power. We need to be able to negotiate for better trade balance. My entire life, my entire adult life, I don't remember us having favorable trade agreements with any country. So it's about time. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they're doing this to us, then we need to stand up. And President Trump is the only president in my lifetime that have stood up to these economic bullies. We've been great to many of these countries, including China, lifting them out of poverty, utter poverty during the 70s. I believe almost like 1 billion people were starving, according to Richard Nixon. He really helped to open China up to the world stage and gave them a lot of aid. And so now it's our turn. You know, we've done enough. Stop taking advantage of America.
Now, we saw several countries in Asia stepping up, talking to the White House, saying they want to reach a deal. And of course, they're so close to China. What do you think that says about the situation in that region?
Yes, so very interesting. ASEAN, the Association of the Southeast Asian Nation, they're going to be probably the third or fourth largest economy in the world after the EU, or possibly overtaking the EU because they're not making a lot of stuff in the EU anymore. So we have to really understand these ASEAN countries, and in particular Vietnam, which is very productive, and it has about $120 billion trade surplus over the United States. So even though it is a socialist country, it's not the CCP. It's not communist China. So we need to differentiate this, and they've had a long history, not necessarily the most friendly with China over the last 2,000 years. For example, Vietnam, they've been fighting off the Chinese invasion, starting with the Trung sisters 2,000 years ago. And more than 1,000 years ago, you had Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, who tried to invade Vietnam. And more recently, right after the Vietnam War, when the Vietnamese were really weakened by the war, the Chinese wanted to invade, but they fought them off. So just because they're neighbors and some of them are socialist country like Vietnam doesn't mean that they are the CCP or they're a colony or an extension, as some people have said. Vietnam, the communism in Vietnam is just in name only. It really is a market capitalist society with a lot of private industry. They have stock markets there. Probably the third largest cryptocurrency market in the world is in Vietnam. So they're very much about the free market. So we need to understand that. My vision for the area in ASEAN is for it to be a free trade zone, much like the EU, maybe not have its own currency, but the ASEAN countries, 10 countries, it's going to be the third or fourth largest trading partner in the world. The US should really have close relations with them, have a free trade zone between the US and the ASEAN countries. It's a great backup and neutralizer for China, where China, I mean, we're very familiar with China from Vietnam. You know, they have not changed their way, even with President Xi. This is how China has behaved. They do what they want in their own time frame, and they want to save face. So President Trump understands that. The only way that you can go up with someone like that is to play hardball. If you want to play hardball, we're going to play hardball. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
So it is very interesting as you're talking about those ASEAN countries kind of all putting that signal out there that they are very interested in striking a deal, but still individually coming to the White House. Meanwhile, if we look to the European Union, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni from Italy, she is the first to have a face-to-face meeting with President Trump. Now, the EU put those retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. on pause for 90 days, saying that they would like to give negotiations a chance. How do you see the EU fitting into all of this?
Well, I love Giorgia Meloni, and she's leading the way, much like Vietnam is leading the way with the ASEAN countries, right? So Italy is moving towards a very democratic, very market-driven society, not beholden to many of the woke ideology that the rest of Europe has embraced, namely Germany, the UK, and then you see, you know, many of the countries there having a lot of problems with immigration, crime, cultural issues. Giorgia Meloni is a great leader for Italy. She understands it culturally and also economically. She'd be a great ally for the US. Yes, the best thing for Europe is to have a free trade zone within, of course, you know, the EU, which they already have, sort of, you know, not including the UK, but also with the United States. But we need to be aligned. We can't be just like slapping 2% tariff on German cars and they're slapping, you know, 20, 30%. like much higher tariffs, taxes, duties, the VIT. They have a lot of stuff, and they've been using it where they're not really importing, American goods, and yet we're importing tons of European cars, wine, cheese, and we give them access to our market, and they're making a lot of money, but yet they don't return the favor. So it's about time. And Georgia Maloney, she understands that. She understands that U.S. has been there for Europe, has always been there for Europe. I mean, think about World War I, World War II. It wasn't really our war. Of course, then it became our war when Pearl Harbor happened. But we really came to Europe's defense, and we've been there for decades supporting them. We just want that favor in return. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We've done you a lot of favors. Do us some favors too. Open your markets up to American products. That's what we're asking. We're not asking for anything more. We're actually sometimes asking for much less. Right? Like what I was saying about the tariffs, like it's not really reciprocal tariffs, because sometimes they have 50% tariffs on us and we're only asking 20% in return.
Allison Wynn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Veronica.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.